I wasn't thinking about it from the Freudian point of view, I guess. Not the official Freudian point of
Mm-hmm.
view, but if I was to take what you just said and I was to take the ego, that part that sits between the id and the superego, and if I was to split it in half, right, and let one half be the lower ego and the other half be the higher ego, which I guess the superego would be that higher self, right? The higher ego. But I think that in man or in people, we have this tug of war between, you know, which way are you going to go? Like you just said, you have the id, which is like, okay, just chill out. We're good. We're gonna relax. And that's
Mm-hmm.
the part I was talking about. That's the part that I feel like we need to kill. Not totally kill, but kind of, in order to focus, you have to turn it off, turn that part
Mm-hmm.
of you off. There's a season for both. Like it's great to relax and to enjoy, what you've built. But there's also a season for focus and having a one-minded sort of mentality about your goal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Being super focused and one-minded. And you can't
Yeah.
have them both at the same time. That's the thing that I think people struggle with, because
Mm-hmm.
you want those things that are far ahead of you, right, out in the distance, but you also want to be comfortable and you want to chill and you want to have a good time. But it's about finding the balance between the two.
I'd agree. So here's a follow-up question. So just speaking to the point you just made about like you having to, there is a time to just like, yeah, my need to lie down, my need to eat, all of that stuff, like the need to fall back, we that can sometimes that. What would you say about the idea that it's the other half that needs to die in terms of like
You
that
mean the
need to
aspirational
achieve
side?
the not necessarily that, but that part of you that says, oh, I spoke about the ego in terms of I have, right? Or I have to. What would you
Mhm.
say about the ego in terms of what you deserve, so to speak? Because I feel like another part of the ego that doesn't get talked about as much, but is also very real, is the parts of us that, like people like to say that men have fragile egos, right? Like the idea that someone can damage our image of ourselves causes a lot of issues, a lot of violence, a lot of problems, period. So, what do you say to the part of like sometimes your whole ego has to die? That part of you that's like, oh, this negotiating to become the ideal self, like the negotiation itself just needs to end. And you just need to work on expanding into that ideal self and not worry about the negotiation period.
Mm.
So, like, for instance, um, I saying that like, oh, I need to have X amount of money in my bank account before I do X, right? Something like that. The
Mhm.
ideal self is just me doing X, right? Whatever it might be. It's me owning a car, me starting a business, me, all of these things. Whereas the ego will tell you, oh, you have to hit these benchmarks before you get to X. As opposed to that, we just say, no, I am X, or I am doing X, or I am becoming X,
Yeah.
as opposed to I need to do this in order to do this. So the part of your ego being the thing that says you need this to do this, that being the whole thing that dies. Meaning
Yes.
instead of the negotiation, it's just, you know what, I'm already young, fly, flashy, king, queen, whoever you believe yourself to be capable of being, you're already that. and you just leave it up to, some people use different things. Some people call it fate. Some people call it the universe. Some people rely on God. Some people like chalk it up to the game to become that person and not worry about the small details, not worry about the benchmarks, just focus on becoming as opposed to focus on individual goals in between.
Mhm. So the first thing that came to my mind when you were talking about that was, and I wrote it down, I said that negotiation never stops until you're fully enlightened. I think that's something that we're going to be dealing with until we reach enlightenment. Because it's at that point where you don't feel like you need anything. You have everything you need, right? And in reality, we do have everything we need. We just don't know it yet. It's that what I would say the lower part of ourselves that doesn't know that yet. Like when you have this thing, and and also like you're saying, oh, I need to have this, I need to have that. And I guess there's two ways I want to go with that. First of all, you need to according to who, right? That's number one. Like who
There we
says you
go.
need to? You know, we're worried about what society says, what people say. And that's the number one problem with the world, to be honest. We're looking around at other people and defining ourselves by what everybody else is doing, right? That's the first thing we need to stop doing. Also, I love what you're saying about like, not seeing yourself from that place of needing something, because you have to see yourself from a place of abundance and not lack or scarcity. That's actually one of the first things I do. If I want to achieve something, I listen to myself and I hear those things that pop up in my head to say, oh, you can't do that. Or what will people think if you do that? Or, that's not normal. That be realistic, right? That part of yourself that you're negotiating with, right? The way I turn it off is I stop myself and I'm like, okay, no. And I tell myself, I already have it. I have whatever that thing is I said I can't do. I'm like, no, I am the opposite of that, right? And I just reaffirm that to myself constantly. And I also love like just cutting out the the hows and the steps from where you are to where you want to be, and just focus on where you want to be. Like be like absolutely obsessed with where you're trying to go. Period.
That's what I was trying to get to. All
I know where
right.
you're going. I know where you're going. But yeah, right. Like focusing on the end rather than the means. And I think a lot of times people say, they'll say, oh, I got to go get this new certification so that I can get this job, so that I can then do this and then that. But the question is, what are you really trying to get to? Let's start there,
Yeah.
And if you start there, then maybe you can, you get better ideas. You can, if you focus on that end goal, like you said, some people call it the universe, God, whatever. I tend to think most of it's all the same thing. Like you said, I mean, we call it by different names, but I think at the end of the day, there are laws in the universe that operate a certain way. And, if you focus on that end goal, everything's going to work out. It might not work out the way you want it to. That's the thing. Maybe there's a lesson you need to learn along the way. But things are going to work out in a way that they need to in order for you to get there. Your job is just to stay focused and do what you got to do.
All right.